My name is Joanna, I'm 30, and I sew dreams out of fabric in my small studio in Brooklyn. And my own dreams? I've spent my entire life carefully stitched up and tucked away in a far corner. Because first came my mom, dad, sister, client, neighbor. The list is endless. And then this morning, that very morning, I was walking to a meeting that was supposed to change my entire future. Lawyers and inheritance, finally fighting for myself. I was wearing my best blouse, my hair pulled back, and I felt my knees shaking. Not from fear, but from the rage I'd been pent up for years. And then I saw him. Amidst this urban war, the torn asphalt, the gaping trenches, the mud, sat an elderly man in a wheelchair. He was simply stuck, helpless, like a chip in this concrete torrent. The construction workers were screaming, the machinery was roaring, and he sat there, clutching the handles of the stroller. And I stopped. My heart sank. "Joanna, you'll be late. This is your chance." But my feet carried me through the mud. "Excuse me, let me help you," I cried, already feeling my sharp heel sinking treacherously into the loose earth. He looked up at me. There wasn't so much despair in them as profound surprise. "My child," his voice, quiet and hoarse, drowned out the roar of the jackhammer. You're all in white. Are you going on a date? To a ball? Why do you need this circus?" I was already pushing the stroller, climbing out onto solid ground, feeling the mud coating the hem of my perfect trousers. "No, not to the ball," I exhaled, shaking my hands. "To a meeting. A very important one. But," I looked straight at him, "seeing someone in trouble and passing by, that's not my style, even if the encounter decides everything." A slow, wise smile crept across his face, furrowed like an old map. It was warm, like an old sun. "Noble," he said simply. "Are you, by any chance, going to Flynn and Partners?" My breath caught. You too? How strange." "Fate," he finished for me. "No coincidence. Let me accompany you. Meeting these sharks alone is not the best idea." We walked slowly. I pushed his wheelchair, and as the cold glass facade of the office loomed ahead, something strange happened within me. All my nervousness, all my trembling, vanished. They were replaced by a feeling of unshakable calm, silence within. And I felt the strength not coming from me. It came from this frail old man next to me. And then it was pure hell. Just 2 days ago, we buried my father. The earth on his grave hadn't yet settled, and our home had already turned into a battlefield. The silence, saturated with grief, was shattered by the sound of slamming cabinet doors and drawers. It was my sister Martha, prowling. She didn't shed a single tear. Not a single one. Instead, like a jackal, she hunted for prey. She was obsessively interested in one document, an inventory of our parents' most valuable assets. While my soul was shattered into a million pieces, she mentally assessed the value of my mother's antique brooches and that very penthouse with a view of Central Park. She burst into the kitchen where I was simply trying to make coffee and remember my father's laugh. She threw a stack of papers on the marble counter. The sound was as icy as her gaze. "Joanna, sign. No talking," her voice cut like glass. "Funerals, medical debts, everything that could be squeezed out has already dried up. These bills need to be covered. The only thing left is the house." I stared at those papers, and the letters danced before my eyes. Fake bills. She tried to trick me into giving up my roof over my head, my place, my memories. "Are you crazy?" I blurted out. "Mom's still inside the walls, and you're already dividing up her things." "Oh, stop playing the victim," she snorted, pacing the living room like a caged tigress. "You've been sewing and sewing in your kennel for 6 years, playing the part of a big-time designer, and you haven't brought a cent into this family. And me? I've been pouring in money for years, maintaining our standard. My hedge fund paid for Mom's doctors, not your rags." Her words made me flush. I stood up, clenching my fists. You infused? You? My voice rose to a scream. I was the one changing Mom's bandages when she was emitting that terrible smell. I was the one sitting up at night and holding her hand when she was in pain and fear. Where have you been, Martha? Where? Your infusions are 5 minutes on the phone once a week. How is she? Hang in there. And then she hung up. She stopped in front of me. Her eyes were empty, like 2 blue shards of ice. You were just a servant, Joanna, she hissed with a quiet, chilling hatred. A comfortable, unpaid servant who lived here with everything provided for, while I was in the real world, creating that very inheritance you now so covet. So don't speak up. Sign. That's all you're even entitled to. My blood truly ran cold. In that moment, I realized I'm not fighting for money. I'm fighting so that all my love, all my sacrifices won't be trampled and dismissed as nothing. The situation exploded in a second. Marta, like a fury, darted toward my old Singer sewing machine, the very one I bought with my first earned money. Stop dragging your junk into this house, she hissed, and such hatred blazed in her eyes that I felt physically chilled. She scooped up my things, my modest dresses, sketches, pattern books, and with frantic force stuffed everything into battered suitcases. She didn't fold them. She threw them, crumpled them, hurled them. You don't have a single centimeter of space here, not a speck of dust. Her scream rang in my ears. She dragged my bags toward the door. I tried to grab hold, but she swatted my hand away. She swung the door open, and my life, packed into 2 suitcases, flew into a dim, dust-smelling hallway. And at that very moment, the sky thundered outside. A downpour poured down so fierce that the glass shook. Consider yourself dead, Marta shouted from the doorway, her face twisted in contempt. I won't let a beggarly seamstress tarnish the reputation of my new home. The heavy oak door slammed shut in my face. The lock clicked. The sound, clear, metallic, final, was louder than any thunder. A shot in the silence. A death sentence. I stood motionless, listening to the rain pound the eaves. Then, shaking all over with rage, grief, disbelief, she dragged her soaking wet suitcases to the elevator. Where to go? Where to spend the night? Her thoughts were jumbled, merging with the sound of the downpour. In the lobby, under the concierge's indifferent gaze, her phone vibrated. An unknown number. Miss Joanna? The voice was smooth, cold, like polished granite. It was Flynn, Martha's lawyer. I remind you of our meeting tomorrow at 10. I hope you understand that this is a formality that will finally cement your current position. We will regard any attempt to challenge the prepared documents as slander, and we guarantee that after the trial, your reputation in professional circles will be forgotten. I remained silent. The receiver grew cold in my hand. Can you hear me? He repeated without a trace of emotion. I hear you, I whispered, and hung up. That's when it hit me, down to the very bones. This wasn't spontaneous anger. This was an ambush, a carefully planned operation. My sister of the month, while I kept vigil at my mother's bedside, had been plotting this blow, waiting for the last parent to die so she could deliver it with certainty. The bitterness of this betrayal was heavier than the wet suitcases I'd dragged through the rain to the subway. Tomorrow's meeting? This wasn't an argument about money anymore. This was a battle for survival, and for the right to look myself in the eye after all this. At precisely 7 in the morning, the alarm rang shrilly in my tiny Brooklyn studio. I was sleeping on the floor, on a makeshift mattress made from scraps of velvet and wool. Every muscle in my back ached, but it was nothing compared to the dread clenching in my stomach. I spent the first hour on a single dress, dark blue, formal, my armor. I steamed it with a heavy iron, removing every crease, every wrinkle. Steam rose to the ceiling, and I prayed that this small ritual, this act of self-respect, would give me strength. In this room, among the brilliant lawyers and my sister, beaming with greed, only my appearance would be my defense, my only weapon against her poisonous insinuations of my low status. The workshop door creaked. Joe, I'm here with reinforcements." It was Becca, my friend. In one hand, she held 2 cups of steaming coffee. In the other, a paper bag that smelled of cinnamon and freshly baked goods. "You've been their rock their whole life, Joanna," she said quietly, handing me the coffee. Her fingers wrapped around my icy ones like a warm ring. "Don't let this woman steal what's yours now. You've earned your share. Not with money, with love, but with money too." Her presence was like a breath of fresh air after suffocation. We sat among the bolts of fabric, and I finally got it out. About the counterfeit invoices, about Flynn, about being thrown out like a puppy. Becca listened without interrupting, only shaking her head occasionally. And in that moment of silence, that fragile peace, my phone vibrated on the cutting table. A message. From Martha. My heart simply sank into emptiness. I opened it. The words burned my eyes. "If I see you at Flynn's today, dressed in your pathetic beggar's rags, I will personally make sure every partner in that building knows who you really are. An unemployed seamstress who came to beg. Remember your place. Don't disgrace me with your appearance." I involuntarily doubled over, as if I'd been punched in the gut. The air was knocked out of my lungs. Becca glanced at the screen, her face twisted in disgust. "Her wealth, Joanna," she said with icy clarity, "it will never buy what you have. Honor." It rotted inside her, even when she was just planning all this. I frantically gathered all my papers into a worn leather folder and ran out into the street. My heart pounded in time with my steps. Don't be late. Just don't be late. But New York seemed to be conspiring with Martha. At the subway station, I was met by a confused crowd and yellow tape. LRA line out of service. Serious substation failure. The announcement sounded like a death sentence. Time was slipping mercilessly through my fingers. The heat, heavy and humid, was already enveloping the city. I had no choice but to run to the bus terminal, and it was more than 10 blocks away. I ran. Sweat poured down my back, mercilessly ruining the carefully ironed fabric of my blue dress. My hair had come loose from its bun, and damp strands clung to my neck and temples. I was becoming exactly the disheveled spectacle Marta had so mocked. My heels dug into the pavement, and every step sent a pain through my tired legs. I weaved between hurrying people, tourists with maps, clowns. It was as if the entire city had turned against me. I turned the corner near a rumbling construction site and suddenly froze. A wheelchair was stuck on the uneven, broken sidewalk right before a deep, dangerous crevice. An elderly man was in it. He was desperately trying to roll the heavy wheels out, but they only sank deeper. His face was flushed with effort, his hands were shaking, and people were walking past. They were looking at their phones, rushing about their business, simply turning away. They passed by without breaking stride. Something inside me tightened. Those trembling hands, they were so reminiscent of Dad's hands in those last days, before they grew silent forever. I wasn't even thinking. The leather folder fell to the sidewalk with a clatter, and I was already rushing toward him. "Please, don't move," I screamed, grabbing the handles of the stroller. "You're going to fall." I pulled with all my strength, trying to lift the front wheels. The fabric of my dress stretched at the seams. He looked up at me. In his tired eyes, besides exhaustion, something else appeared. A deep, aching relief. You're in a great hurry, young lady," he croaked. His voice was worn, but there was an incredible inner steel in it. "Why do you need this? What could an old cripple give you in return?" I brushed a damp strand of hair from my forehead, catching my breath. "My father taught me that there are things more important than any meeting," I exhaled, "even the most important ones." 15 minutes later, gritting my teeth, I dragged Edgar and his heavy metal wheelchair onto the last bus heading to the legal district. Every muscle burned. My back was soaked with sweat. Inside, it was stuffy and packed. The morning crowd, irritated, tired, indifferent. No one even moved to help or give up their seat. "Excuse me, please allow me," I said, pushing through the wall of displeased glances until I found a tiny nook for Edgar. I stood next to him, gripping the handrail until my knuckles turned white. The bus jerked and roared through the traffic. With every sudden braking, I threw myself onto the stroller, becoming a living anchor to keep it from skidding across the dirty floor. Edgar looked at me. His tired eyes glowed with a quiet, bottomless gratitude. He saw that I put his safety above all else, above my own haggard appearance, above comfort, above even the fear of being late. The air was thick with the smell of wet clothes and exhaust fumes, but strangely enough, the quiet, unwavering dignity emanating from this old man made the ride almost bearable. And he spoke. His voice, low and velvety, somehow cut through the roar of the engine and the hubbub of the crowd. He spoke of his long years of service to a prominent family, and his story, it sounded frighteningly familiar, like an echo of my own. He spoke of devotion, of quiet care, of a home that became one's own, and then about children in wealthy families. Some, he said, are born with hearts of gold. For others, the thirst for possession eats away at their souls, leaving only a cold, calculating machine within. I didn't know who he was. But when, looking out the window, he suddenly softly described a man, generous, wise, valuing honor above profit, I caught my breath. It was a portrait of my father, precise as if painted from life. "It seems your father was a man of exceptional qualities," Edgar remarked, watching the tears well up in my eyes. "Someone who measured people by kindness, not by the numbers on an account." A thought struck me. How could this stranger know so precisely what Martha had tried to erase? His words were like balm to a wounded soul. They reminded me, I'm not crazy. My values are not naive foolishness. They are a legacy, and it lives on. He saw the shadow of anxiety still lingering on my face, and suddenly he extended his hand. His palm, warm and gnarled, lay over mine, clenched into a fist on the railing. His touch was firm, reassuring, almost paternal. "Don't let the darkness of others dim your light, Joanna," he said with such unshakable confidence that a shiver ran down my spine. "People with kind hearts, in their darkest hours, they are always protected by forces that are invisible. Remember that." A spark of knowledge flickered in his eyes, as if he were more than just a random fellow traveler, as if he knew everything about me. I couldn't hold it in any longer. The words burst out, quiet and cracked. "I'm so afraid of her, Edgar, of Martha." "And her lawyer, this Flynn," I admitted, clutching the worn folder to my chest like a shield. "They have everything under control. They have money, connections, a whole mountain of false papers. And I only have this folder and the truth, which, it seems, no one needs." I closed my eyes, trying to suppress a shudder. Flynn is a shark. He feeds on other people's fear. And Martha, she always got her way. Always. By sheer force of will. She broke our family for the sake of square footage. Systematically, cold-bloodedly. Edgar listened without interrupting. His calm wasn't just patience. It was deep, focused, almost frightening. His fingers, resting on his cane, tightened a little as I spoke of betrayal. He waited until I was out of breath and then looked straight at me. His gaze was sharp and clear, like a blade. "Justice, my child," he said firmly, "is like water. It always finds a way, often in the most unexpected places. Remember, when you enter that office, you must hold your head above everyone else, above the marble, above their gold watches. Your strength lies in your integrity." With just 15 minutes left until our meeting, Edgar and I found ourselves in the glittering glass lobby of a skyscraper in the heart of Manhattan. Everything here screamed money. The marble polished to a mirror shine, the cool light pouring from the soaring ceilings, the silent security guards in perfect uniforms. This place was designed to inspire awe, to make people like me feel like insects. I noticed that Edgar looked tired and haggard after our odyssey. Without a second thought, I spent the last few dollars in my wallet on a bottle of cold mineral water at the nearest kiosk. "Here, have a drink," I said softly, kneeling next to his stroller. I pulled out my only clean silk handkerchief, a small piece of luxury in my world, and carefully began wiping the streaks of dried construction dirt from his worn cotton sleeves. It was important to me that in this realm of cold chic, he felt at least a modicum of human warmth and respect. Edgar watched my actions silently. A faint, barely perceptible smile flitted across his face, lined like an old map. He took a sip of water, and it seemed as if a small tension had drained from his shoulders. This fragile, peaceful moment was torn to shreds. Knock, knock, knock. The rhythmic, abrupt, aggressive click of heels on marble, a sound that declared its right to all space. Marta emerged from the elevator lobby. She was dressed in a perfect designer suit, which I knew cost as much as my studio in 6 months. Her gait was a honed weapon, arrogant, swift, forcing people to make way. A cloud of heavy, cloyingly sweet perfume reached us before she did. Her gaze slid over me, then fell on Edgar in his stroller, and she laughed. A sharp, chilling laugh that echoed unpleasantly through the vaulted lobby. "Joanna, I told you not to embarrass me," her voice rang like breaking glass. "But you, as always, have outdone yourself. You look like an unpaid nurse for a shabby beggar. The award for the most pathetic picture of the day is already in order." Her eyes slid over my rumpled dress with undisguised disgust, then settled on Edgar. She looked at him as if he were a stain on flawless marble. Her entire posture, every muscle, radiated such superiority that my stomach twisted with anger and searing shame. Flynn stood next to her, like a shadow. He glanced at his massive gold watch with an expression of extreme impatience, as if every second spent in our company poisoned his air. He adjusted his silk tie, and his gaze, sliding over my tattered folder, made it clear this was a formality, the death throes of my hopes. Martha took another step forward, her face twisted into a grimace of pure, undiluted cruelty. Suddenly, she reached out and snatched the water bottle from my fingers. My hands trembled treacherously. "I see you have money for the homeless," she remarked sarcastically, "but not for decent shoes for a meeting like this." What a funny choice of priorities. And before I could even process it, she tipped the bottle. Cold water splashed onto the floor, splashing my old, worn-out pumps in large drops. I froze in place, stunned. Not because of the water, but because of the monstrous, childish pettiness of the gesture. Cold moisture seeped through the thin leather of my shoes, soaking my socks. This physical sensation of humiliation was so harsh and concrete against the luxurious marble. People in expensive suits passing by cast brief, indifferent glances. To them, I was a clown in her circus. "My sister is right about one thing, though," Martha's voice, dripping with venom, brought me back to reality. "You really are a magnet for all sorts of scum, and this broken old man is the perfect companion for a penniless seamstress." Something boiled inside me. A ready reply was already waiting on my tongue, but before I could spit it out, another hand lay on mine. Edgar's hand. His touch was firm, calm, unwavering. It became an anchor in the very center of the growing storm of my anger and shame. I fell silent, catching my breath. And then he spoke. "A man who measures his importance by the height of his heels and the price tag on his label," Edgar said with icy, polished precision, "often stands on the rottenest foundation. What do you think, young lady?" He looked directly at Martha, not up at her as a helpless old man might, but equally. His gaze was surprisingly firm, clear, and utterly fearless. There was not a hint of servility in it before her wealth. The effect was immediate. Martha looked as if she had been slapped, publicly, in full view of the entire luxurious hall, with a dirty rag. Her face flushed a deep, unsightly crimson from her neck to her hairline. "You," she gasped with rage. "You'll keep quiet and be grateful I didn't call security to throw you out for causing a public nuisance." Flynn, like a loyal dog, stepped forward, using his imposing physique as an additional tool of pressure. He loomed over me, creating a physical threat. Edgar only bowed his head slightly, not in a bow, but more like a scientist examining an interesting but venomous specimen. His frightening calm remained unshaken, and the tension between us had escalated so much that it seemed about to snap like an overstretched string, slicing this lobby in half. Exactly at 9 o'clock, the deep, solemn chime of a clock from a nearby tower pierced the morning silence. The chime floated among the stone canyons of Manhattan, sounding like a death knell for my last hopes. That sound seemed to blow Martha's last fuse. She completely lost control. She began pacing the marble floor, her heels making a frantic, nervous clicking sound. Her gaze, predatory and blazing, darted toward the security desk. "I won't allow it!" Her shrill, hysterical scream rent the air. "I won't allow this filthy tramp to disgrace this building. He belongs in a flophouse, not among corporate offices." She waved her hand, and 2 security guards in perfectly tailored uniforms immediately moved toward us. Their faces were unreadable. Marta pointed her finger at Edgar. "He was pestering me, begging for money. He's a scammer." Her voice rang with false, feigned panic. At that moment, my mind shut down. Pure instinct took over. I stepped forward, practically throwing myself between the guards and the stroller, arms outstretched. My heart was pounding, as if it wanted to burst out of my chest, mixing terror with a furious, animalistic need to protect. "Stop!" My voice trembled, but it was loud, at its peak. It was heard throughout the lobby. "This man is with me. You have no right to insult his dignity. He's done nothing but sit here. Nothing." The guards slowed, stunned by my sudden outburst. They saw in my eyes not hysteria, but unwavering, desperate confidence. But Marta was already there. She wedged herself between us, her face contorted into a grimace of pure, inordinate arrogance. "Do you realize who you're talking to?" she hissed, turning to the senior security guard. "Do you know how much business my firm brings in annually for the landlord of this building? Do your job immediately." I didn't back down. I kept my eyes on the guard, trying to reach the man behind the uniform. "This gentleman is under my care," I said, quieter now, but with the same firmness. "Any attempt to remove him by force will be considered harassment and age discrimination. I'm sure your management will want to look into such an incident." Marta didn't burst into laughter, but rather a shrill, hysterical giggle that sent shivers down my spine. "Oh my God, your false holiness," she cried, rolling her eyes. "That's the reason you'll leave here empty-handed. It's not a weakness, baby. It's a diagnosis." She stepped so close to me that I could smell her thick, suffocating perfume. "Your pathological need to cling to the helpless is your ticket to the bottom. You'll end up just like that decrepit old man, sleeping on a park bench while I drink coffee in my penthouse with a view of our entire city." Her words were so monstrously cruel that several people in the lobby, pretending not to notice the scene, involuntarily turned around, their faces frozen in shock. While Martha, furious at the guards' hesitation, was hissing something in their faces, Flynn approached me. He came too close. He began rhythmically, with disgusting condescension, tapping my shoulder with a thick stitched leather folder. Knock, 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 as if marking the rhythm of my execution. He leaned over. The smell of stale coffee and expensive mouthwash assaulted my nose. "Listen to me carefully, Joanna," he whispered, and his whisper was more terrifying than any scream. "Your sister hasn't slept at night. She's documented it. Every failed attempt you made to sell a dress, every month without a steady income. We have a whole library of your worthlessness. The judge will swallow it all in 5 minutes and spit you out of here penniless." He smiled, a cold, toothless, shark-like smile. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet, his corporate jargon enveloping me like heavy resin. "You haven't contributed a cent to this family. In 10 years. You're a parasite, a social parasite, and we'll prove it." I tried to back away, but my back collided. It was Martha. She blocked my path, her eyes shining with the feverish, sick gleam of anticipated victory. And the guards, under her persistent, poisonous pressure, began to shift again. And through all this chaos, through the shouts, the whispers, the tension that threatened to tear the air, sat Edgar. His silence wasn't helpless, it was frightening. Deep and bottomless, like the eye of a storm where absolute calm reigns. He didn't shout, didn't defend himself from accusations of begging. He simply watched. His sharp, penetrating gaze was fixed on Martha's face. He studied every twitch of greed at the corners of her mouth, every flicker of madness in her eyes, every venomous note in her voice. It seemed he wasn't just listening, he was recording. Entering into some eternal, impartial register the very essence of her soul while she was so furiously digging her own grave. "Have you finished this pathetic performance of your insecurity?" his voice finally rang out. He didn't raise his tone. His voice was even, clear, and commanding, and so unexpected that the guards froze mid-step, as if rooted to the spot. Martha turned sharply to him, her mouth already opening for another dose of filth. But her gaze met his, and something in it, that unwavering, icy clarity, paralyzed her. For just a split second, but it was enough to fill the lobby with a heavy, oppressive silence. The silence before a blow. A strange, chilling shiver ran down my spine. In that moment, I understood with absolute clarity. The man I'd helped on the street was no longer just a fragile stranger. He had transformed into a silent judge. And he had just entered the courtroom. 30 minutes later, the heavy oak doors of the conference room swung open silently, ushering us into a sterile, chilling space. It smelled of expensive paper, polished wood, and such a professional chill, it felt like it could freeze your soul. A huge table the color of dried blood stretched across the entire room. The sunlight, pouring from ceiling to floor, was bright but utterly lifeless, providing not a drop of warmth. Flynn, in control of the situation, instantly took his place at the head of the room. With practiced, almost mechanical movements, he began laying out documents on the table. Every rustle of paper echoed in my ears like a heavy blow. He pulled out the main document, an elegant copy of the will printed on thick paper. It bore my parents' signatures. Signatures that looked alien. According to that piece of paper, Martha was declared the sole heir. Of everything, of every square meter, every share, every family heirloom. Years of my life, nights spent at my mother's bedside, the renunciation of my dream, all of it was reduced to nothing. To nothing. I was erased from the family history, like a typo. Martha leaned back in her leather chair. That same triumphant, venomous smile played on her lips. She slid a single sheet of paper across the table toward me. "Sign," she said simply. It was an official renunciation of everything. And in exchange, she offered a severance pay, $5,000, the price that, in her world, would buy a handbag. For me, the price of my silence and my dignity. This wasn't charity. It was a slap in the face. "Sign now," she continued, her voice dripping with a voluptuous, haughty satisfaction. "And perhaps I'll let you have your old needles and thread before I change all the locks in my house." My hand reached for the pen. My fingers trembled so much I was afraid I wouldn't be able to hold it. There was a lump in my throat and a crushing, icy weight in my chest. This was the end. Complete, utter defeat. But at the very moment the tip of the pen was about to touch the paper, a voice rang out in the room. That same voice, quiet, yet cutting through the space like the crack of a whip. "Stop." It was Edgar. Everyone turned to look at him. He slowly raised his hand, and the movement was filled with such undeniable authority that even Flynn froze. Then he pulled out from the inside pocket of his worn jacket a badge. Not just any plastic card, a massive, shining gold and enamel badge bearing the eagle and the official seal of the New York State Supreme Judicial Review Board. He placed it on the table with a resounding, final click. The room fell so silent that the hum of the ventilation system could be heard. Slowly, Edgar opened his old, worn leather briefcase. He pulled out not a folder, but a single document in a thick blue cover. He placed it on top of Flynn's forgery. "Put this forgery away," he said. His voice was no longer the voice of an old man. It had become an instrument, a hammer of justice. "I am the sole legal custodian, the custodian of your parents' last will and testament, the only one that is valid." Martha's face turned ashen. She glanced back and forth between the badge and the document, her brain clearly refusing to piece the picture together. The man she mocked, the one she wanted to throw out like a tramp, was the one our parents entrusted with their most precious possession, more than their own daughter. She looked as if she'd seen a ghost. Her hands shook so violently that she had to grip the edge of the mahogany desk to keep from collapsing. But the worst was yet to come. Edgar opened the document and began reading. Not everything. A specific clause. A secret clause my father had included, anticipating this. Exactly this. Your father, Edgar's voice cut through the air, anticipated greed. He included a moral clause. Any heir found guilty of fraud, coercion, or cruelty to family members is automatically disinherited, down to the last cent. He looked up and looked directly at Martha. Panic raged in her eyes. You were so blinded by your supposed superiority that you forgot, Martha. Our parents were geniuses at reading souls. They saw you, and they asked me to watch. He paused, letting the words sink in. Every insult you hurled at your sister in the lobby, your attempt to buy her silence with that measly $5,000, it's all evidence, documented. Your own cruelty is tearing your inheritance from your grasp. A strangled, animalistic scream erupted from Martha's throat. Not a scream, but the sound of pillars breaking within her. Her entire world, built on greed and superiority, was crumbling before her eyes. And it was being destroyed by someone she considered a loser. "This can't be," she shrieked, her voice breaking under the unbearable pressure. "I was supposed to be the successful one, the one who will manage the fortune. And Joanna? She's just a pathetic loser. A loser!" Flynn tried to intervene, muttering something about procedural irregularities, but Edgar simply turned his head. Just a look, icy, piercing, full of contempt for his pathetic puppetry. And the lawyer, this shark, shut up. He broke out in a sticky sweat, and the expensive silk shirt darkened on the back. He realized he had just put not only the case, but also his license on the line. And Edgar continued. He read my father's final instructions. The primary administrator, the legal owner of the penthouse and all the family's investment funds was me, Joanna. I looked at this old man, at his wrinkled face, at his firm hand resting on the blue folder. The frail stranger from the construction site turned out to be a titan, a pillar of honor who had stood guard over other people's promises and family secrets for decades. Martha muttered incoherently, clinging to the ghosts of excuses. Flynn panicked, shoving his papers into his briefcase, trying to crawl away from the epicenter of the disaster he himself had helped create. And suddenly, the air in the room changed. Heavy, poisoned by lies and greed, it seemed to clear, breathable again. The truth, heavy and inexorable, settled in every corner of this sterile office, putting a bold end to the reign of terror Martha had unleashed in my life. And then I understood. My father's last gift wasn't money or an apartment. It was him, Edgar, his presence, his incorruptible honor. He was the living guarantor that justice isn't an abstraction, that it exists and can overtake even those who believe they can escape punishment. And this justice can't be bought for any money in the world. At precisely 10 o'clock in the morning, the meeting ended, but not with a businesslike handshake, but with an ominous, deafening silence. A silence that echoed with the truths just revealed. All of Martha's dirty schemes, all of her lies, were laid bare in a merciless light, and there was nowhere to hide from that light. Based on the original will and those very audio recordings Edgar had thoughtfully made in the lobby, The legal execution of the inheritance proceeded with lightning speed. The house, the assets, everything was now mine. The papers were signed with such speed that Flynn's eye twitched helplessly. And then Martha broke. She didn't fall, she collapsed, right onto the polished floor. Her impeccable designer suit crumpled, her hair fell apart, and sobs burst from her, ugly, choking, full of animal despair. "Joanna, I'm sorry. Forgive me. I'll fix it. I'll help you fix everything. We're sisters." She crawled toward me on her knees, her fingers clutching the edge of my chair. I looked down at her, and strangely enough, no anger, no triumph, only a deep, all-consuming weariness and disappointment. Because I understood. She didn't regret what she'd done. She regretted losing. This realization burned the last spark of kindred within me. "It's unfair. This is unfair," she howled, now addressing the void. "The architect of this injustice was solely your own cruelty, Miss Martha," Edgar said, cold as steel. "You yourself laid every stone on the path to your downfall." But the consequences went far beyond her tears. Edgar slowly turned to Flynn. His gaze was heavy as a weight. "As for you, Mr. Flynn, my next application will be filed with the bar. It will be accompanied by a full package of evidence proving your involvement in forgery and conspiracy to defraud. I imagine by the end of the week you'll be busy looking for a new profession. If, that is, you find one." Flynn turned so pale he looked like a wax figure. All his corporate connections, all his pretense of importance, evaporated in the face of the legendary authority he couldn't discern in the old man in the wheelchair. I stood up. I walked over to Martha, who was still sitting on the floor. "Go away," I said quietly, but making sure every word was pronounced. "There's nothing between us anymore. No family, no connections. The sister you might have had is dead. You buried her under tons of your greed and contempt for my simple life." She made a last convulsive effort. She grabbed my hand. Her fingers were icy and sticky with tears. I didn't flinch. I simply looked at her hand and then into her eyes, and she let go. I nodded to the guards at the door, the very ones she had called against me, and now, stony-faced, they took her by the arms and led her away. From the room, from my future, in complete and utter dishonor. The room was empty. Only Edgar and I remained. I approached him. My voice trembled. I don't know how to thank you. You saved more than just an inheritance. You saved me." He took my hand in his warm, gnarled palms. "You thanked me, my child, long before, on that street, by choosing to stop. In this world, everything comes back. Goodness, especially. Sometimes in the most unexpected ways." We walked out of the icy glass palace together, and I suddenly noticed the sky over Manhattan today was incredibly clear, deep, and blue, as if the city's thunderstorm itself had purified the air, washing away all the lies and dirt. Justice, it turns out, has its own special scent, and that scent is pure. I knew what I would do. This money, this house, they would become not a monument, but a tool to help those who had been pushed aside, forgotten, considered weak, just as I had once been almost pushed aside. The black company sedan pulled up smoothly to the curb. Edgar signaled the driver to wait. "Goodbye, Joanna. Live with dignity. They would be proud of you." "And you?" I asked. "Will we see each other again?" He smiled his wise, slightly sad smile, and without answering, got into the car. The window closed, the car disappeared into the stream of traffic. And that very feeling arrived. Silence. Not emptiness, but a deep, soothing silence after a long storm. The same silence I hadn't felt since my parents fell ill. The weight I'd carried for years melted away, giving way to something new. The quiet, unwavering confidence of a woman who didn't win the lottery. She reclaimed her home and, more importantly, her dignity, with nothing but the strength of her own heart. This story isn't a tale of sudden wealth. It's a reminder, carved in stone. True kindness is never wasted. Like a boomerang, it always returns. And those who trample others on their way up will sooner or later stumble, and their fall will be bitter and lonely. The greatest wealth isn't in a bank account. It's in looking in the mirror and seeing someone who isn't ashamed, in the strength to extend a hand when everyone else is passing by. Thank you for being with me until the end of this incredible journey. Every like, every subscription, every thought is priceless to me. And now I really want to hear from you. Have you experienced betrayal in your life? Have you found the strength to forgive? Or perhaps you too have experienced unexpected justice. Share in the comments. Let's create a corner of support and wisdom here. Your stories inspire me.